Hello, everyone. What I'm doing in this video is the same thing in the PowerPoint lecture, which is above, which has the recorded sound files on it. I know for a lot of folks find those things kind of difficult to kind of use, because they don't rewind appropriately. And that's just a limitation of sort of Microsoft technology. So what I'm going to do is just with voice over Zoom presentation here. And you might actually find this easier. What I'm going to do is sequentially go through the rest of the modules and assignments and do this for every single one of the PowerPoints there. I'm going to leave the PowerPoints there because I think they're helpful because you can actually download those to your own computer. In case you aren't online at some point or have connectivity issues, at least they'll be there for you to view. Where this particular type of style requires connection to the internet because it's going to be a YouTube-based video. But I'll have both of you. Hopefully this might be a little bit better for your study needs, right? So I'm going to do a screen share right now to our opening What is Anthropology lecture. All right. Okay, so here is What is Anthropology. I don't need to actually play the video up top for you. If you want to go back to the actual PowerPoint above this one, you can download it and actually have a look at that. But I'm really going to go over exactly what I'm talking about. So, we talk about what anthropology is. Well, I'll go through it a little bit in the video. It really is a study of what it is to be human. Anthropology is a very broad field. And if you think about where social sciences are at right now, I've heard about sociology and humanities, all the sort of various aspects, of gender studies and all this sort of stuff. Well, it actually began with anthropology under a single sort of umbrella. And as people started arguing and fighting, they started gravitating out to their own sort of fields and started variously different departments. So we are sort of the mother sort of discipline. Now, we are a macro discipline that's couched into 4 different sub-disciplines, which you'll need to know about. Now, the sub-discipline, of course, you're studying here is biological anthropology, and that will be the main focus, of course, of this course. But to give a good introduction to the class and all the other subfields is quite essential, in case you decide to become an anthropologist, and also good to let you know what we actually do. All right. So the term anthropology itself is, of course, one of the Greek terms. Academics are famous for this, picking up a Greek term, Latin term, and utilizing it in a language that's mostly spoken in English because it sounds very cryptic and it makes it sound very smart and meaning and knowledgeable, right? That's kind of a smoke and parlors trick, and I wish they would stop that and actually, translate these things down into modern English so everybody knows exactly what we do. Anthropology, anthropo, really it just means human. Ology is the study of, so the study of what it is to be human. Now, in the biological sort of realm, in this course, we're going to study how we became human. What motivates human behavior? We're going to be looking at patterns of human and environmental interaction, the past and the present. And we're also going to be looking at material culture and associated behavior in the past and the present. In other words, at what points of our evolutionary history were we able to make particular types of material culture? And what does that say about the worldviews and the mental capabilities and the physical capabilities, too, of earlier humans? Now, the other sort of subfields that are involved in anthropology, of course, expand on this greatly, and we'll have a look at what they do in just a moment. Okay. All right. So, anthropology in itself, because we have all these subfields and because we are the mother discipline, it was really broad in its scope. And we use a lot of interdisciplinary collaboration. In my field, in this field of biological anthropology, as you're going to see in this course as it unfolds, we use a lot of help and work with geologists. They work with us a lot. Chemists work with us a lot. The forensics folks in the modern fields work with us a lot. Zoologists work with us. Botanists work with us. So we have a lot of interdisciplinary interaction. As you're going to see in some of the doing this course, actually physicists actually work with us time to time because our interests often overlap. Because, really when it comes down to what interests us the most in the world is ourselves. Okay? The next thing we need to know is that anthropology isn't actually a science. So when the suffix, the word ology, really shows that, and we follow the scientific method. So that's one of the things we're going to be exploring in this class. What does science really actually do? And how do we apply it in the context of anthropology, particularly biological anthropology? Now, at the same time, because we're dealing with the human subject ourselves, in a way we are a humanity, because we're also doing cross-cultural comparisons of people, trying to figure out, what motivates, how is it that this biological thing that we have, the hardware, the minds that we have, produce all the forms of culture in the world. And what sort of meaningful things does the mind actually produce? And in a way, we are, a humanity, because we study the wonderful thing like languages and texts and philosophies, in which we're actually, this mind, this evolved set of characteristics, are actually capable of expressing. Now, other the subfields will take it to a different level of humanities, which you'll see pretty quickly. Okay. So, why do we study anthropology? Well, I'll tell you from my perspective, and from working as an anthropologist for a long period of time, and sort of coming to a consensus. In the particular sort of arena of all four fields, what would be a common sort of thing of why we do this? Well, we sort of want to know how humans fit the broader evolutionary history of our planet. Are we really that different, or are we very similar to other life forms? And if so, how does this change the perspectives about ourselves? What should humans be doing if we find that we have a much closer relationship to the rest of the animal forms and to our planet than we actually first realize, right? So it can be an actually, a life motivating and changing experience, and which is really why I enjoy this. This is an eye opener. I hope you find that too. We gain a lot of knowledge about people and other cultures of the world. And we get a lot of insights about our own culture. We remove our cultural blinders by studying other people, living with them, and going out in the world. We're able to see ourselves more critically and be able to address some of the problems that we have here, really more matter factually, and I would think more pragmatically, able to actually, change things here for the better. Without all the ethnocentrism, as we are the greatest in the world, we can see our faults. And only when you actually see your faults can you actually improve. Certainly, we develop skills and perspectives that can help manage cultural differences, and this can transcend in all sorts of environments. I don't care whether you're gonna be a manager someday, or you're going to be the leader of a foreign nation, or you're going to go into any sort of aspect of business too. That developing skills that help you manage difference is so incredibly valuable. Right? Because it actually increases productivity. The happier people are when they get together, and the sense of creating a community, the more productive they are, and actually the more progress people make. Now, in addition, we do things on a heavier level too. Many of anthropologists are actually in the diplomatic corps and teams, and we really have to handle very serious cultural differences so that people can see eye to eye and overcome problems, which actually lead to some really serious violent conflicts. So we actually work in some very serious situations also. Not so much in the biological end, of course. As a biological anthropologist, I don't really do that sort of stuff, and that will be for some of the other sub-disciplines of anthropology, which we'll look at in just a moment. Now, some of the last two things here. Does it enhance your critical thinking skills? Well, absolutely. You're able to absolutely analyze situations from a sort of a different point of view. So we can tease out what the right thing to do is, right? We can look at all the particular perspectives involved in an argument, or, competing ideas, and be able to systematically move through and figure out which is the best targeted one for the entire community, or business, or whatever you're involved in. So critical thinking skills really do flow from anthropology. And in fact, if you look at the acceptance rates to major law schools, a degree in anthropology will get you in faster than any other degree. I'm so proud to sort of say that. And it's true, it's not by a huge margin, but we edge out many of the other degrees if your hopes and dreams are in law. Right? And for me, I guess this is the most subjective thing. I do indeed get a fun and rewarding career. My gosh, I could not. I've done so many different things in my life. I really have. I've been a network engineer. I've worked for IBM. I've worked for big companies before, working pharmaceuticals. And I'll tell you what, I would never go back and do those jobs again. I feel like a fish in a fish tank. It was horrible, trapped all the time. And I made good money, but whatever. I still make good money right now, and I do what I want to do, and I can explore everything that I want to do in the world, ask questions about humanity, work with great people like you and the students which are out there. Where can you get that anywhere else? I love this. So while I hate to invite too many people into this, because we don't want too much competition, if this is really what you want to do, my gosh, we are a system of people, a group of people that we're happy to help you, to get into this career any way which we can, right? Because we love it. All right. So let's go to the sub-disciplines. How is anthropology sort of divided up? Now, all the disciplines are divided up. I don't care if you go to physics, astrophysics, quantum physics, mechanics, all sorts of stuff, all these different sort of subfields. And same thing with chemistry, organic chemistry, physical chemistry, all nuclear chemistry, all these sort of different subfields. Now we're divided up into four basic subfields. Now here is us over here on the right. We're the biological anthropology. Now, some folks call it physical anthropology. I think the modern interpretation is biological. And we say biological simply because there's so much integration of information which deals with the molecular level and aspects of DNA and inheritance that we do take a really big biological perspective because of the interdisciplinary focus. So that's why this course is called biological anthropology. And in it ourselves, my own discipline here, there's a lot of subdisciplines which you'll be learning about too. Paleoanthropology. Paleo is old, so the study of ancient humans and their evolutionary, legacy and development. We're going to be looking at that. That's one of our mainstays in the course. We're going to be doing a little bit of primatology, looking at our closest living cousins, the primates, particularly the great apes, bonobos, gorillas, and chimpanzee, as well as orangutans. We're looking at their behaviors as a model for past human behaviors, and in a way, a model for our own behaviors, which we'll sort of study in this course a little bit. We'll get a little bit of a primer. We're not going to go into that in great detail. Medical anthropology. What is it about natural selection and our own beings on the planet at this point in time that have left our immune systems in the condition in which they are? What sort of diseases are humans susceptible to? What are we resistant to? And how is it that we go about treating things? What does this mind allow us to do in producing medical technology? And this will be a really big focus on us towards the end of the course, because it gives some insights and ideas about our directions and what we should be doing as humans as far as addressing some of the problems we have in our own culture. And we're going through that right now, which is really great because we're in the times of COVID. This is the greatest teaching tool ever. It's a tragedy for all those that are being injured by this. But it is a great teaching tool in biological anthropology, and I'll help integrate that in a way I think is pragmatic and helpful. And the last is forensic anthropology. And this is really studying death in a legal context. And many of you may have seen NCIS shows and all of these bone shows and stuff out there. Well, I'm going to go in to figure out what is the reality of these things. How is it that us forensic anthropologists actually go about doing our jobs? And how does the study of ancient bones and human evolution lend to great skills so we can contribute and actually get wonderful jobs like that if we so choose to in law enforcement? Well, the next subdiscipline is archaeology. Archaeology is looking at the material remains of the past. Generally, we don't have, the people. They're dead, being dead. We may find some bones, the remaining bones, and we can step in and try to look at some of the issues with the bones that might talk to us about how people lived. What were their worldviews, how they interacted. But mostly we try to tease this out by the material record which they leave behind. So archaeologists are busy trying to sort out the material record and try to develop a thought world. And like with my youngest daughter, I'd go into her room and I sit there for a while going, maybe I can figure out who this kid is by what the decorations on her room, what she reads. And I'll sit there for a while. I get my daughter. I kind of understand how she's thinking about the world. Well, archaeologists are no different. We're exploring the deep past, looking at what people have left behind and trying to understand, how their worldviews and thought worlds are put together. Now, archaeologists work at fairly narrow time frames. Generally, within the last 10 to 12,000 years, and much sooner, simply because before that there's very scant, history, cultural histories of humans. Occasionally there are, but normally, it's not in the deep time context, hundreds of thousands of millions of years, as us biological anthropologists are actually looking at. Now, the next field of study here is linguistic anthropology. Most linguistic anthropology is what we call sociolinguistics, and that is how people utilize language, the social use of language, and what it actually means. So how to develop thought worlds around us. What is the importance of language? How does it work in establishing our identity, maintaining our identity, and shifting our identity? What does it mean to humans to be a speaking primate? My gosh, look at the things that we can do with language. And where would we be without it? How does it actually, produce the cultures around us and signify change? Linguistic anthropologists also spill over to ethnomusicology. People actually study music, cross-culturally and look at the value and shifts in value and changes in culture due to shifts and changes in music, which can be a really, very interesting thing to do. Linguistic anthropologists also look at the historical changes of language, which I find very boring, to tell you the truth, but other people love to do it. They look at the ancient languages and how they have changed over time, so they can see the evolution and shifts and changes of language. Me, if I don't have living speakers, I'm really not that interested in it, but a lot of people love that stuff, and I can agree with it. But anthropologists do that also, with the etymology, the history of languages. And then finally, we have cultural anthropologists. And I shouldn't say, last but least, because they're not. The majority of anthropologists that are practicing are cultural anthropologists. And I believe the American Anthropological Association, our binding organization that oversees all the anthropologists out here, reported that 70% of all anthropologists are cultural anthropologists. And one of the reasons is the sort of the focus of study for cultural anthropologists are living people, right? So they can go out and talk to living people in the world and try to understand, how they do things, what motivates human behavior, what sort of patterns of culture do we see? Can we theorize about humans in particular situations will react the same way across the globe? Yes or no? And picking up the nomothetic, larger, sort of grander issues about human behavior and sort of a cross-cultural comparative sort of way. What cultural anthropologists do is really live with the people, which is very different than most sort of science like psychology or sociology. It's not uncommon for us, for cultural anthropologists to live with people for, a year to 5 years at a time, to be very deeply embedded with the day-to-day aspects, so literally they become the other within the culture, so they can write within it deeply contextualized countings, which we refer to ethnography. So you can see that little term there. The ethnography is the final result. And of course, if this ethnography expands to be cross-cultural comparison, we can compare one culture to the other in a very critical sort of way. We can actually produce what we call ethnologies of the actual world. That's also very exciting work. I'm sort of a dyed-in-the-wool cultural anthropologist of how I started. I've done field work in the island of Kiribati in Micronesia. I've done work in the Solomon Islands on Coolamungara, the island of Coolamungara, and I spent a year doing work in Northern Ireland in the lovely county Tyrone during the time of the Troubles, which is very interesting, looking at youth and violence and what was happening within these groups. And I have to say, it was awfully exciting, but it's also young people's work. You've got to be mobile and moving around. And now I'm just a basic biological anthropologist, and I'm happy and content. Now, the last thing is where the disciplines are going and what sort of work are we sort of working for? Well, right now, because money is so very limited in what we're studying, really is true. I mean, there's not a lot of grants coming in. And what we do get, we really want it to help people because any money that we take or all the disciplines out there take to do research, when a lot of people are starving, having trouble paying their rent, we shouldn't just do frivolous sort of research to pile up in some laboratory somewhere for research sake. What we want to do is the information in which we learn about needs to benefit humanity in some way. So a real focus is the applied stuff. How do we work to making what we get, putting it back in the public to make life better for folks? So really, in the end, my course should be able to do that for you. And you'll find that towards the end of the class, when we really take a turn towards applying what we've learned to our actual own life. So hold me to that, and you'll see. I promise that'll be very interesting for you and very entertaining and a very creative sort of endeavor of what you have before you. Okay, so these little slides here, which you can look at the previous slideshow that I actually have, right above this, the PowerPoint. You can look at these slides if you want. I've gone through linguistic anthropology. I've gone through archaeology. I've gone through cultural anthropology. We begin to talk about biological anthropology, but you're going to get so much of this just by completing the coursework. You'll know exactly what we do by the end because you'll be doing a lot of the work yourself. Looking at case studies of what we do, working or seeing what professional anthropologists do as they're answering their questions. Okay, and then medical anthropology we've looked at. Now the thing about it is that as a discipline, I will put this forward to let you know what we do most of the time. We're very fieldwork oriented. So people who like to live their life indoors, to go to an office space, to be enclosed by fluorescent lights, and have someone else's music on or smell someone's bad cologne or, or all that kind of crap, that's a good world for you, but it's not a good world for anthropologists. It's not what we do. We like to be out in the world, traveling, looking at stuff, researching stuff. That's our life. What makes us thrive, because life happens out there. It doesn't happen in the room which you're living in, right? It happens out there in the world, and that's where we go. So as a biological anthropologist now, I was in Iceland last month. I was in Iceland for a whole month during the summer, looking at, problems with sleep deprivation, which the Icelandic people don't have a problem with. So what the heck is wrong with them? Is it something in their genes? Have they been adapted for this? What's happening? But they have no loss of function. And in fact, they're one of the top 10 living civilizations in the world, where in the summertime, basically, you only have about an hour of darkness a day. It's only like twilight. And normally civilizations are impacted by that and lose a lot of their sort of health. That's just one sort of thing that I do. Next summer, I'm heading to Africa. They should be open, and back I go. So for those of you that like, traveling and having a life like this, it's open for you. And believe me, I raised my family doing that, and it made them outdoor people and sort of following this sort of tradition, which I'm actually very proud of. Okay, but if you're not an outdoor person, you're in closed space, you like offices, sitting there, this is really probably not the career for you. All right. So this explains a little bit about what we do, as far as cultural anthropologists and linguistic anthropologists and archaeologists. But typically, in our sort of perspective, what differentiates biological anthropologists from all the rest of the anthropologists is, by and large, I don't interact with living subjects to get data. I don't. See, I'm not studying people directly. I'm studying, fossilized remains or past cultures. But I do work with a lot of people. So when I go on site or in the field, I'm interacting with dozens of professionals all the time, trying to interpret stuff, going out and exploring together. It's just I'm working with a lot of my own colleagues. I'm just not there alone, cold facing, talking to a lot of strangers, trying to get their stories about the world. And that's just the type of human being I am. I like that collegiality when I go out the field. I have a group of people to sort of go with. It's sort of a common focus. That's what we actually do. Okay, let's move on. All right, so what I have here, and this is important for you, which I can't actually access because I'm actually doing a voiceover, and it's also why I put the PowerPoints out for you, because I can embed important sort of video stuff. One of the things I mentioned what anthropologists do is for the heart of fieldwork. Our idea is to get out of our own culture, out of our own space, and get out there in the field to see real things happening. That's biological anthropology. Of course, archaeologists have to go out there and find the stuff. That's linguistic anthropology. You have to go out there where the people are speaking the real stuff. And of course, old cultural anthropologists are out there where old cultures are happening. Well, this film here, if you will go to the downloaded sort of version, have a look at it, you look at the guy who actually invented the idea of fieldwork. It really had to be invented. People had to sort of, these old Victorians had to learn that you can't just sit in an armchair and learn something about the world. You have to get off that armchair, off the veranda, out into the field. So this little film will give you an example of how early anthropologists learned about the value of this. And it's called Strangers Abroad by Branislaw Malinowski, the inventor of fieldwork. Okay. So I have other sort of films here, which you'll have to, again, access from the downloaded PowerPoint, a downloaded PowerPoint, which is right above this stuff, on what archaeologists actually do in many contexts, working with Native Americans, in modern sort of groups, trying to help them understand their own culture and preserve their own culture. Not only do we try to find, the material remains of people in the past, make some sense about their thoughts and worldview and put process into that, we also try to help people, assist them with their self-determination, and sort of reestablishing their own cultural values and status in the world by giving them self-esteem, by helping them, retrieve their past, place them in proper context for learning for their future generations. And we do a lot of this for Native Americans, particularly within our own country. But we also work with groups all over the world. It's your choice and whatever your cultural focus is. So here's a film that will sort of demonstrate what we do. And then, of course, there's biological anthropology. I have a film here. Again, you have to refer to it on the downloaded copy of this slideshow, which is above. Here's a professional anthropologist, a paleoanthropologist who looks at deep time, named Lee Berger. He works in South Africa. He's found some of the most startling and incredible finds in the last 2 years. So he will show you sort of a day in the life of what they do and what field work would be like out in the field, and what he does for a living, what sort of drives him. I love what he does. I want his job. He's at the university with Waterstan in South Africa. I would love to go there. Oh my God, I would love to be there. So, but you can see what he does for a living. Okay, all right. Now, lastly, what we got to do is that no matter what branch of anthropology you study, we're studying biological, whether it's archaeologists, whether it's linguistics, whether it's cultural, we still have to understand this idea of culture that makes us so unique. Even in biological anthropology, we're the end result of so much evolution. And the end result is that we are the only creature on this whole planet of all 14,441,900 species. We're the only ones that can produce serious material culture, and it's symbolic. It has meaning to us. I mean, seriously, like a chimpanzee can use a hammer, can kind of bang a hammer on something, but the chimpanzee doesn't care what kind of hammer he picks up. Now you're different. I went to Home Depot and I saw people like trying on hammers, see which would look cool or not, right? If it was like the right hammer for them. Like I could care less what kind of hammer. Some people get into hammers. That sort of association with identity, that we are so famous for, it's part of culture. And we're the only things on the planet that do it. So biological anthropologists are sort of interesting in why we do it. Why are we evolved? Is it just chance? What were the advantages of culture? So we need to have a real good working definition. If that's our end goal to reach it, we're going to work from the past, to the contemporary times. So this is a really good a definition that most anthropologists, culture anthropologists especially, and all anthropologists sort of share together that binds us, right? So culture, it's a shared set of ideals, values, practices, and standards of behavior. That's real behavior. People expect you to behave in a certain way, all the norms. But these must be learned. Nothing comes what you think. You just don't pop out this way and you are who you are. People say, I know who I am. No, you are constructed the way that you are. Because everything that you've learned has been learned from others or been modeled and shared by members of a group, right? You are literally a blank slate that's unfortunately sort of programmed in a way by the culturescape around you. And in the milieu of social competition, you might sort of manage to emerge with some sort of unique, personality, right? But mostly you're products of sort of group behaviors. And that's what it actually is to be human, which is very interesting to study ourselves. And when you look at humans cross-culturally, you'll actually be able to sort of see it. Like I love, working with students, and everybody thinks they're such an individual. Yet I'll look out in the classroom and I'll go, ha ha, you're all wearing the same thing. Maybe a little different designs on it, but it's the same shirt, same pants. It's basically the same stuff that you're wearing because you share those ideals. I don't see anybody wearing a kimono, or Pakistani, I don't see any, or Shari, I don't see anybody, in my classrooms wearing things that would definitely say, I'm a total individual, right? And at least being psychologically healthy. So we need to think about, that's why culture is so important to us. It binds us together, and it is a product of our mental processes. So we need to sort of track the evolutionary development, try to understand who we really are, right? So that's why it's so actually very important, right? Now, culture, is also something that adapts us to. And it's very important because it adapts us in ways that it doesn't adapt other animals. Other animals have innate behavior. They know exactly what to do because it's pre-programmed in their head. It's not like an impulse. They have instruction sets. They just do it. They just do it every day. It's like you watching a deer. If you watch a deer run from a predator, if it's running from a mountain lion, it'll know exactly how to run. Think about it. It knows how to dodge. It just does this program in its mind sequentially to know how to get away from a mountain lion. If a bear is by like a Kodiak bear, it knows how to run from a Kodiak bear, which is very different than a mountain lion. It doesn't have to think about it. Now, with humans, it's different. We are sitting ducks because we have nothing out there that tells us how to address the world. We have to learn everything. But because we can learn so many different things and so many different situations, it can broadly adapt to so many different environments that no other of the animals could actually inhabit, which makes us very good generalists. So we have to explore, why would nature produce this wonderful generalist that we are? That's one of our goals in this course. Okay. So remember that we have very, very few behavioral instincts. We have little impulses, but nothing really definable. There's a few things that might blur those boundaries, but a very, very few things compared to what other animals have as far as innate behavior. We have very little of it, which is really weird. All the other animals out there mostly has innate behavior, and we don't. Why is it that we're the only ones, without it? What makes us unique, and why this? So our behavior is overwhelmingly culturally determined and not biologically determined. Now, the thing about it is, what's sort of interesting about it, why we study other primates, I talked about primatology, is because, well, yes, humans produce symbolic culture, but learned behavior is not unique to humans. Most primates, our primate cousins like gorillas and orangutans, bonobos, especially chimpanzees, especially troglodytes beris, there's a new sort of species of chimp that's been emerging for about 500,000 years, very clever chimps. They're very, very, very smart, incredibly clever chimps. It's just they don't push the symbolic ends of it, Material culture doesn't have any sort of social meaning. Right? So why is it that we took off in this sort of direction? What sort of benefits that it give us? And it's what sort of liabilities too. Anthropology not only discovers, sort of unfolds the events of advantages. We look at some of the disadvantages of material culture which we produce. Unfortunately, young people are in a time now where you're seeing it, right? The hopes and dreams of capitalism, the market economy, is sort of collapsing the world, ecologies everywhere, which can be a real detriment to us, and other issues too. So we'll sort of discover the sort of the meaning of being human. That'll be one of the things we actually do in this course. It should be fun. All right. So not to belabor culture too much, but I think it's important to know that it's very important because it does so much for us. That other animals just take on innate behavior. Think about it. And we have to find ways of getting food. Other animals just kill other animals or graze. They know how to get food. We have to grow it. My God, prepare it. Think about how laborious, process it. All this stuff we do to get nutrition, which is very different than the nutrition requirements or how other animals sort of gain food, right? Which is very different. So what's up with this? When did it change? Has it always been this way, right? What were humans doing in the past? And why did things change the way that they are to the conditions we are right now? Reproduction is very important. Culture needs to sort of satisfy, not only how we reproduce, how childcare is actually handled. Family structure, friend structure, who does the work so that we actually have successful reproduction and the rearing of new generations. Just like, we're unlike other animals. Those other animals can like sit anywhere. That deer's around there laying on the ground. I lay on the ground for 10 minutes. I'm so uncomfortable. Deer lays on a log upside down. They're like, I'm happy as a clam. So does a bear, lays in a blackberry bush and he's sleeping in there, so happy. But humans are really sensitive to sort of comfort issues. It's kind of interesting. So we spend a lot of our time trying to engineer these things. So is this a recent thing that we're doing? Has this always been part of humanity? Or when did this actually begin? What's changed in our body for our demands for creature comforts, our hedonistic sort of ways of life? Interesting questions. And safety. Other animals can provide for their own safety because of their own bodily strengths many of the time. What about humans? When did our need to form, armies and police, and weapons when did this become necessary? Were we able to take care of ourselves in the past? Were our bodies different or not? So we can investigate that, the importance of the effervescence of culture, providing these things. Additionally, we require a lot of relaxation because we live such stressful lives. We have to actually unwind. I've never seen a deer come like in the forest going, all right, people leave me alone, I need my space. I'm gonna crawl on this tree and just unwind. Give me a joint, leave me alone. Right? Come on, I need a beer, right? We don't see that among other animal species, but yet humans, have sort of a relaxation sort of requirement. Why? Is there some sort of centripetal social function that pulls us together in large groups now? And now we require excessive amounts of relaxation sort of to regain ourselves. Has this always been the way that it is? We'll be investigating that. Additionally, movement. Do people move the same way? And how is it the culture is getting us around? Now we use the car a lot, our jets and airplanes and trains. What are the consequences of that to our development in the future and natural selection? Who will we become when we continue utilizing this sort of technology in which we have? And what were humans like in the past that didn't have these things? Were they different than us? Can we already see that in our little evolutionary package as we shift and change? We'll be exploring that too. And lastly, growth. And when I think about growth, it's not like physical growth; it's emotional growth. One thing about humans is that we don't do well when we're stagnant. One of the leading causes of things like depressions are your mind has been in one place for too long. You feel trapped and you can't actually expand and grow and shift and change. All cultures are designed to help you grow in life, have many different sort of experiences, right? States of social being changes where you see a progress in your life that's recognized by the social fabric around you, right? And if that growth isn't present, bad things can actually happen to you. So, when did this become necessary for humans? Can we see it in our evolved sort of body plan? Is there any evidence for it in the past? And are we making any mistakes in our culture by not allowing for growth and development anymore? So you can see all the sort of questions and stuff that actually biological anthropologists look at. And it's also looked at by cultural anthropologists too. We're just trying to find the biological underpinnings of our requirements and how culture produces these things. Okay. Culture does a ton One of the issues is about culture is that it's not really great at pulling around facts, real facts around the world. Mostly what culture does is it pulls up social facts. And those are things, the truths that we find about the world, which become facts because we just share them as facts. When people start talking about something being true, like the news or something, we sort of consider these things naturalized concepts. And they can work for us as long as they work to build a coherent and meaningful actual society. So we have to sort of investigate the way humans have built knowledge about the world, through developments of cultures and social facts, and sort of how these things have come into, I would call, a fountainhead of probably, antagonism. Real science, who produces real knowledge, working against social groups that produce social facts around the world, which we saw in the last election, the big lie, right? And so you can see a classic example of that. And we try to answer questions of how does the mind do this? And for what purpose? Is it good? Is it bad? We can sort of tease out some of those ideas too. All right. And lastly, culture gives us a very interesting sort of sense. It's called a worldview. How we think the world works. What's our place in the world? What's the place of your lineage in the world against other lineages? It gives you all sorts of interesting things that are very unique to actually humans. So we're going to be looking at how this is actually produced and when it was actually produced in our evolutionary history. Okay. All right. So I'm going to have a lot of stuff about what culture actually does. But one thing I want to think about too, and our greatest concern at this time, no matter what type of anthropologist you are, is that the vast history of humans when they produce culture is any cultures that were here 2,000 years ago are gone, by the way. But what culture here was 2,000 years ago that's in the same state right now? That doesn't exist. They're gone. Cultures don't last very long. Somehow they tend to go in maladaptation. They start with this rise and they do really well for their people and they go downhill. Everything falls apart, and then bad things actually happen. So is there something that we can learn about the way people produce culture? Some of the warning signs in which they start going into maladaptation. And there are a way that we can provide information to the inhabitants of these cultures, in particular their governments, about what will most likely happen by the patterns which we've seen in the past, to rescue them so they don't go into maladaptation. That's one of the strengths that we have. Of course, one of the issues we have too is getting people to listen to us, but that's because our numbers are so small. But if we get joiners with people like you, maybe we'll make some headway with this sort of stuff. Okay. All right. So what I want you to think about, things I want you to consider and be able to do. How would you actually define anthropology? After I've given you my definition, what is it? What is it? Do you agree with my definition that's the study of what it is to be human? Or is it a bigger word? So, well, what would you actually consider? What are the objectives of anthropology? And why don't you think about maybe what the objectives of biological anthropology might be, the particular subdiscipline we live in. Now, why do you think we're unique? Of all the studies you've had, the courses that you've had, what do you think makes this thing unique, this course? For what I've said so far, what would be unique about it? So in other words, yeah, what is it that's different? It just shocks you, the things that you've heard me say that it might be very different from other experience you've had in other courses about talking about what they do. Now, also within that thing, let's couch this. How are biological anthropologists different from other subdisciplines? What's unique about us? So be able to define biological anthropology, because you're liable, of course, to see that one on an upcoming quiz. I can guarantee you. If you think about what's going on in a professor's mind, we ought to be asking you, A, B, or C, or D. Which one best defines biological anthropologists? So that's a radar out there to keep that one on the radar. Okay. Now the thing about it is that we have to think about the last question very seriously too. What is culture, and what does it take to have it? Okay. So we can think about what culture is by what I've said, but the what does it take to have it, may require a lengthy investigation that I may take the entire length of the course. So when we think about, a deer or a bear, they don't have culture. So humans have culture. What does it take? I mean, what does it take in the structure of the body and the mind? What does it take to actually produce it? And we'll be looking at the biological steps, the evolutionary steps to come into play to actually produce this, so that we will know what it takes to have it. Right? That's our sort of end game. All right. So that's what I have for an introduction to this course. So the next step for here is try to understand what science does and how we operate as scientists. And then we can subtly sort of move into, looking at the deep past and analyzing, our evolutionary sort of progression as we began way back in time and arriving at who we are right now. All right, so thanks for viewing. I'm going to stop the recording right now.